Okay. Uh, hey, how are you? Karibuni tena. Thank you so much for joining us again at CountyLeaks. We are happy to have you. This is our second episode, and we are happy that you're keeping up with us. Before we dive in, I want to say asante sana. We've received very positive feedback on the last episode, your comments, your encouragement. We really, really appreciate that. But above all, I think that signifies that Kenyans are really paying attention. Kenyans are careful and keen to know what is going wrong in the country, and Kenyans truly, truly want change. It's unfortunate to say, but as of right now, I think the responsibility to watch the government is on the public fully, fully, fully. So any portion that any person picks and they get support from the public, I think that is very encouraging. As we work on this, we hope you continue keeping with us. We will grow to more and make sure whatever it is that we are speaking on actually gets changed if it's a wrongful act. And even then, we will require your support. But as of now, thank you so much for keeping with us. Today, we're going to look at two areas. We're going to follow up on your comments on the Nairobi episode and some of the arising issues from Nairobi. And then after that, we're going to look at the Isiolo County. I am aware that when we mention a county that you do not stay in, you might be tempted not to be interested and look at it. But I am asking you that this is an issue that impacts your taxes. Why do I say that? Bonnie pointed out last time that as a country, we are running at a budget deficit right now, meaning majority of our expenditure is actually being funded by loans. We've gone above what we can afford. For example, Isiolo County, it's a county that makes a revenue of 190 million. That is last year's statistic. This year, their budget was 5.2 billion. That means 5 billion is money either that the national government made as revenue, but we know for a fact that is borrowed money. So you're going to pay the cost of, the loan itself, and we as a public, the whole Kenya is going to pay the cost of the loan, that is interest. So be interested every time we touch on any county, because most of the counties do not raise the money sufficient to sustain themselves. They depend on the national government, and we contribute to the national government. So be keen, keep with us, irrespective of the county. And again, thank you for your support. Before we continue, I want to introduce Bonnie. Again, he's very key to this. He's been doing the numbers. Most of the time I get back to him, I ask, Bonnie, what does this number mean? Would you clarify on this? He's the magic behind the show, and we are grateful to have him here. Bonnie, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Boni Mwangi. I'm a US-based Kenyan economist and CPA. And I have a lot of passion when it comes to governance, when it comes to responsible government. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, then we are going to dive into Nairobi. And the first issue that came up from the last episode from the public is what is wrong if the county employs more people? It's a form of employment. I know we are aware between, I think, age 17 to 30, 35 or 30. I'm not sure. Sorry if I'm wrong on this statistic, but 70% of that age bracket is unemployed. So the people are saying, what is wrong if the county government chooses to employ 16,000 people? Before Bonnie jumps in, I would like to point just a few issues. Of the 16,000 people that we pointed out in Nairobi County government, about half of that number, I think around 7,777, about half of that number are ghost workers because they share bank accounts, they share biographic data. So the only reasonable explanation that can come out of that is that those people do not actually exist. They are ghost workers. In addition to that, as much as we have the 16,000 people, still we outsource most of the services provided by the county government. Garbage collection is outsourced to private subcontractors. Um, Building of infrastructure, every kind of infrastructure is subcontracted to other people. The only thing that I have in my head that probably the county does, besides the MCAs making law and all that, is mostly administrative works of all these functions. And then how kanjo wenye wako tao wanangoja watu wakishoot video wakiwashikashika. So is that worth 55% of the revenue that the county receives? Bonnie, speak to that.
Yeah, so thank you. This is a great question. So I spend a lot of my time talking about the percentage or the fraction of revenues that are being used on salaries relative to the revenue for the county. And I do that because, frankly, it's one of the easiest things that we can fix to make sure that we stop serving citizens. There is a
Yes.
law in our country, the Public Finance Management Law of 2015, that caps spending on salaries at 35% of revenue. It's supposed to be one of the easiest things to understand about government because government's purpose is to serve citizens. When that law was put into place, the idea was to make sure that we have guardrails so that we don't have corrupt people, greedy people come into office and decide to spend 60%, 70% of the revenue on themselves. That's the
Mm.
point of that law, right? Again, the entire point of government is service to citizens. Even if you didn't have that law, I think as citizens, we will have to look at what's happening with our resources and ask ourselves whether or not we are actually serving people, right? That's the point. So
Mm.
when you hear me talking about for example, the idea that Nairobi is spending 55% of revenue on salaries, I'm not the only one who thinks
Mm.
about that. There's a law that says that they should
Yes.
not be spending 35%. Um, this is what happens. I mean, it's kind of like, in life, we have more needs generally than resources. So you have to try
Yes.
and balance being able to serve people, right? And you need to do it efficiently, particularly in government where um, there's a lot of needs and frankly, there's often you don't have enough resources. So you have to be really, really efficient. You have to
That
be
is.
really, really purposeful when it comes to how you deploy these resources. Because when you have a country like Nairobi that has 4.6 million people, it has, a lot of needs, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of hospitals. If you decide to spend 55% of your revenue on compensation, as opposed to the 35% maximum, the natural consequence of that is that you don't have enough money to go collect garbage. You don't have money to go and build a hospital. You don't have enough money to go and hire a doctor. And the
Mhm.
implications are immediate. When you go to a county hospital today and you walk in and people are being asked to spend the night with a stranger, you go there and
Mhm.
there's no equipment. You look outside your business and you see garbage in front of you. It is because we've decided to do what we should not be doing with the money, right? So again, the
Yeah.
legal limit is 35%. We decide we don't care about that. We're going to spend 55%. So the discussion around how much of our revenue we are spending on salaries is central to any discussion around the effectiveness of our structure of government.
I agree with you. I agree
Yeah.
with you fully. And I think people might try and compare with countries like China where the government has employed a majority of the people. But one thing
Hmm.
that we need to point out clearly is a country like China, most of the entities are profit making entities. The
Right.
Nairobi County is an
Hmm.
their purpose is to provide services. And and there is no profit attachment to I think their, what is it called, their financial matrix. It's
Yeah.
provide
And
and maybe earn sufficient to be able to provide those services, which is not the case even as of now because they do not earn sufficient to
yeah.
sustain their budget. So you cannot compare an entity whose purpose is just to provide services and
Right.
an entity whose purpose is, in addition to provision of services, they have to make
Hmm.
sure they are making a profit from that. Let's say if the county government chose to have something like a power plant where
Hmm.
they are in Nairobi and then the
Right.
extra energy they will sell to KPLC and make revenue from that, then by
Right.
all means, maybe employ more people. But
Yeah.
even then, you have to ensure the number of people that you're employing, you can
Hmm.
comfortably pay for them and not go through loans and other means to be able to pay for them. I mean, that's just not good stewardship.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about the concept of what I like to call business sense and common sense, and
Mm,
the fact that it's lacking in when you look at our government affairs. If you are the CEO of a company in the private sector, you are judged
mm,
by how you deploy those resources to bring profits to the company to grow its value,
mhm,
right? In the private sector, that's, it's easy. Everyone knows that you're going to look at how much, did you have in capital to deploy? How did you use it? What did you generate out of it? In government,
mm,
we're looking at every shilling and saying, your job is here to serve citizens. So the
yes.
question around how much of that shilling was actually used on serving citizens, that's really the primary way of evaluating whether or not government is effective. So if Nairobi County has 33 billion to serve 4.6 million people, but it spends 55% of it on itself, and that's just on compensation before we look at all these other things. When you're done with that analysis, you're going to find that maybe 70% of it, 75% of it is actually spent on the system. And that's why when you look across the country, you know, you pick any county, not just Nairobi. You look at Kiambu, you look at Turkana, when you compare um, when you look at the money that's being sent to these counties over a period of time, for
Mm,
example, if I look at the last 10 years and look at Turkana, which has received 116 billion, when you go down and you look at, can you see anyone's life improving? Can you see improvement in terms of infrastructure? Can you actually see the county growing its ability to depend on themselves? This is a very important concept, and we didn't speak a lot about it last time. So maybe I spend a minute to kind of provide some context. We have 47 counties in our republic. Every one of these counties has a governor and they have a deputy governor. They have a local assembly. We copied this system of government from places like the US without really asking whether or not the system was going to be able to succeed in our country. And what I mean by that is if you look at the state of Texas, for example, where I live, it has a very big economy, right? The economy of Texas is about 21 times the size of Kenya's economy. It's able to generate its own income so that whatever Texas decides to do with its money, the federal government doesn't really care much about it. And if you're in Idaho, if you're in California, if you're in Pennsylvania, you don't care much about what Texas is doing because Texas has enough to sort of meet its costs. So if Texas decides to
yes.
spend 70% of its money on, let's say, social services, someone in Idaho might disagree with that, but Texas is doing what it wants to do, and it's able to do that. So the state that receives the most help in the U.S. is Montana, and Montana is able to generate 70% of its revenue locally, and it gets about 30% help. In our country, we have the
Mhm,
total opposite. We have 47 counties. The average county today is only able to support itself up to 10% of its budget. And
yes.
so 90% of each county's budget has to come from somewhere else. So you made the point of the fact that we are talking about Nairobi, we are talking about Isiolo. If you think that this issue is specific to the county like that, you're kidding yourself because if Nairobi needs 70% of its budget from citizens outside of Nairobi, then what happens with that money when it gets there? It's your business. If Isiolo can only raise 3% of its budget 10 years into devolution. So if you are in Nairobi, if you're in Mombasa, if you're in Murang'a, it's your business what happens with that money because, again, we have 47 counties. None of them can support themselves. In fact, the
Mhm,
average county can only raise 10% of its cost, right? So what's happening in any of these counties is our business, all of us, because
yes.
and at the end of the day, we are borrowing this money and we're gonna have to pay.
Yes. I fully agree with you. I will go to the next item that came up.
Hmm.
So, as of now, uh, about 2 months or more, but in the comments, I saw mostly indication that it's 2 months.
Hmm.
The employee, the Nairobi County government have not been paid. And again, I think one of the reason is because of the bloated budget, because I think 55% is just unmanageable for the
Yeah,
county to handle, would say so. In addition to that, I think maybe disbursement from the national government might be an issue. But then again, we cannot negate the fact that just 55% is something
hmm,
that is not manageable. But also, in addition to that, I just want to paint this picture.
right.
Last month, I believe, the lecturers were on strike. A few months ago,
Mm-hmm.
uh, county employees, the nurses, the doctors of Kiambu County were on strike.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is something that cuts across Kenya. It's either the teachers are on strike, the
Right.
lecturers are on strike.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else is not being paid. But is there a
Right.
point you've ever the MPs have not been paid? Is there a point you've ever had the president has not been paid their salary?
Yeah.
Is there a point you've ever had that the county government, the MCAs and the governor, they've not received their salary? It is
Yeah.
everyone that is not a priority
Mm-hmm.
except themselves. They will ensure their needs are covered and they go up and above to pay themselves on time, to pay themselves in excesses. But then now the rest of us, we are left
Yeah.
there and it's just an issue of, oh, this time it's the nurses, the next time it's the doctors, the next time it's the lecturers. And now these city employees, they've not been paid for over 2 months. Bonnie, do you think, because I'm looking at countries like New Zealand,
Mm-hmm.
in countries like Sweden, they have a
Mm-hmm.
law which says that
Mm-hmm.
the frontline workers, in case of a budget crisis,
Mm-hmm.
they have priority of payment. Do you
Right.
think as a country we need to consider, because you're a leader, you're supposed to be someone of service. Your
Right.
needs are not supposed to be a priority. My needs are
Yeah.
supposed to be your priority. Do you think as a country we should advocate for laws that ensure frontline workers like nurses, like doctors and teachers get priority in payment. And
Mm-hmm.
then these government officials can only pay themselves after the other people who are crucial to the economy are paid.
Yeah, I mean, so the situation you're describing is really shameful when you think about it, because it's a symbol of what's wrong with our country. It's a symbol of upside down priorities.
Mm,
How does a city, or how does a government, a county government with 33 billion in revenue, end up not paying its workers 2 months? How is that possible? Um, Again, we spent a lot of time in the last session talking about these spending bills, right? I told you the fact that all of a sudden Nairobi has a bill for 6.3 billion that needs to be sent to lawyers, for lawyers, right? So whatever function that 6.3 billion was supposed to serve in terms of helping citizens, all of a sudden
mm,
there's a hole, right? Because now we have to decide: do we go and build a hospital? Do we pay our workers, or do we pay these four lawyers, right? That's what's
yes,
happening. You know, revenue is not, revenue doesn't change. If you come into a year and you're going to run a government and you know that your revenue there is going to be 33 billion, that number is not going to change. But what's going to happen is, or what impacts your ability to serve, is how you actually decide to spend this money. If you come in and
yes,
decide that you're going to spend 55% of it on salaries for 0.3% of the population, the natural consequence of that, you won't have money to pay nurses. You won't have people, you're not gonna have the money to do all these other things that you want to do. The challenge that I see, and quite frankly, the most frustrating thing for me, is why leaders are behaving this way, and then they get surprised. So, I mean, if you spend 55% of your revenue on salaries, when you know the law says that the maximum is 35%, you've taken 6.7 billion. And that 6.7 billion is what needed to be used to pay a doctor, to pay a nurse, right? Why is it that then we are surprised when we get to a point where there's not enough money to pay these people, right? So I
yes,
am not surprised that we're having these issues, because when I look at government, I see the incompetence when it comes to handling resources. This is a natural consequence of that. When you spend 6.7 billion on salaries, illegally, by the way, over and above the legal limit, and then you spend 6.3 billion on attorney fees for four lawyers. Just between those two together, you're looking at almost 13 billion. Well, 13 billion was supposed to be to go to pay nurses and doctors. All of a sudden, you don't have that money. So this is not
yes,
surprising, but it tells you all you need to know about the lack of leadership and the lack of common sense and business and county government affairs. Because if you, in the private sector, you're not going to be able to do this. You can't go 2 months without paying your vendors, right? Because you're going to get a bad name, you're going to be sued. So I think that we need to bring common sense and business sense into government affairs.
yes, yes. I agree
Yeah.
with you. There's that aspect of common sense, but I think also in terms of legislation, it's
Right.
just important because I think we say in Kenya we over legislate, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently I think common sense does not work. So we need
Yeah.
to be told, Flavia, please do the right thing. And that is the only way I am going to do the right thing. So at
Yeah.
this point, I think we should pick best practices and
Mm-hmm.
say, fine workers, they ought to be paid before the MPs can be paid before, because I realized if the pain cuts across to them,
Mm-hmm.
that is the only time they will feel they need to make a change. But if it's just a reserve of the majority, public
Mm-hmm.
majority, and not the leaders, then it is none of their, and it never bothers them that much. All right, we're going to go to our next issue.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, also, the governor of Nairobi indicated that payments should be channeled through tier three, I think, not tier one banks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the intention for move away from tier one banks.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe it's speculative, but I
Mm-hmm.
am looking at previous governments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, Kibaki encouraged for government to use
Right.
Equity Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Told it even extended to loans from donors
Right.
and grants from donor. The channeling was done through Equity Bank.
Mm-hmm.
During the previous regime,
Right.
President Uhuru did the same, but through NCBA.
Right.
It's speculated right now the intent is to use some other local bank that is
Right.
linked to some politics.
Right.
This has been happening for years.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it speaks to conflict of interest.
Right.
It is thing to say, oh, okay, through competitive bidding, let's decide this is the bank that is going to take this, and this
Mm-hmm.
is the bank that is not going to take this. But through transparent competitive bidding, and then you
Mm-hmm.
arrive at that decision.
Right.
But if it's not done through competitive bidding, this
Yeah.
speaks to conflict of interest. And I want to ask you, how do you think as a country we are going to deal with the aspect of the executive
Mm-hmm.
keeping, like, using their public office for private
Yeah.
gain? How do
Right.
we draw a line between duty
Yeah.
and personal business when it comes to the executive?
So you've heard me use these terms often, and I just use them last few minutes when it comes to government affairs. The lack of common sense in business sense. In the private sector, if you're a leader and you're articulating to your shareholders about a change that you want to pursue, in this case, for example, if you want to take your business or banking relationship from one bank to the next, you need to be able to tell your shareholders and your employees why you're doing it, right? What is the value that you see um, or you create by moving from one bank to the next? Whether it's you're gonna be able to access more capital, whether it's the cost of doing business with them is gonna go down. You have to be able to articulate that. Um, but when you look at what's happening in government, for example, I have not heard Governor Sakaja articulate to anyone why he believes that the county government should move its banking relationship from the current uh, partnership that they have to some other bank. So when you have not done that, when you have not articulated that, uh, you know, citizens have to ask why you're doing it, particularly when you hear the fact that this local bank they're going to is owned partly or wholly by people that have people that are more senior in government. So to me, it goes back to the same thing that I talked about with the fact that we are doing a lot of things in government that have no common sense, that have no businesses. I mean, you look at that transaction, you ask yourself, why would you know, a county government that has had a relationship with another bank for a long time, why do they decide to move from that relationship to another relationship? And they have not articulated why. It again, we have to demand that when these leaders are running affairs on our behalf, that they explain to us as the ultimate
Yes.
bosses in this system why they are making some decisions. They need to give us what's in it for us,
Yes.
right? Are you going to be saving money? What is it that is going to achieve for us as citizens? What value are you going to create by that?
I agree. I agree with you fully. I totally
Hmm.
agree with you. There has to be a value to the public, but it cannot be any other reason that they're not choosing to explain. All right, at
Right.
this point, we are going to move to Isiolo County. And before we start, I just want to give some background statistic about Isiolo County. And then after that, we will go through the issues to identify areas where money has leaked from the county and gone to
Right.
private pockets.
Hmm.
So Isiolo, as a county, has a population of about 270,000 people. Um, the average income of the population is 8,500 a month.
Hmm.
The poverty rate is 56%, which means
Right.
more than half can't afford food or even a place to sleep.
Right.
Um, their annual budget as of this year was 5.2 billion.
Right.
And then their own source revenue, as I had indicated earlier, was 190
Right.
million. This is just 3% of the actual budget that they need. Um, and then the rest will come from the national government transfer.
Right.
That is
Hmm.
about 5 billion.
Yeah.
And then over 8 years of devolution, the county has received about 41 billion.
Right.
And a significant percentage of that in billions, and that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
going to talk through, has
Mm-hmm.
been missing or listed or unaccounted for over
Right.
the past couple of years. Um, when a county that is this poor,
Mm-hmm.
um, what does that mean for basic services like clinics and water if we realize we are losing about, I think, is it 13.5 billion?
Yeah.
Again, just the opportunity cost.
I mean, I have looked at almost every country in our republic, and I think that Kenyans know now there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of wastage everywhere.
Mm,
It is, even like I said, I'm very close to this data, and I've seen a lot of issues. The issues that are impacting Isiolo are just, it's very sad when you look at what's happening. You're talking about a country that has 270,000 people. You're talking about a country where 56% of the population has a very hard time affording 2 meals a day. You're talking about a country where, access to healthcare is almost non-existent. Sources of water, almost non-existent. As I said before, my some of my closest cousins live in Isiolo, so I spend a lot of time in Isiolo, and I know the needs that exist there. So, when I ask myself, given my trips to Isiolo, I'm looking for 41 billion in terms of improvement in the standards of living, and you don't see it. I go there and I'm looking at infrastructure, and you don't see it. It's very sad because to me this is a textbook example of, if you had to write a book about how not to behave in government, this would be it. This would be it. What's happening in Isiolo is just devastating. Again, 55% of the population, 56% cannot afford 2 meals a day. We've sent
yes.
41 billion there, and 13.5 billion, based on my analysis, has either been wasted, has either been stolen, or it cannot be accounted for. And I can give you a couple of examples of some of this. The 13.5 billion. So let me kind of give you a quick breakdown of how I came up with this number. The the general, maybe like 6 or 7 buckets of issues that are causing this. The first one is there's a lot of this county does not believe in disclosure. So there is an expectation uh, under the law that when a county government does business with anybody, that they are supposed to publish this report and say we issued a contract for X amount to this company for this. So that's an expectation. The 8 years that I looked at, the county of Isiolo has never reported their relationship with anybody. They have never, for example, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes. One of their biggest projects is to build a market at the cost of almost 600 million. Nobody knows who the contractor for that market is. I don't know it because I have not seen it. And I can see that when I look at the auditor's report every single year, the auditor points out that the government of Isiolo has not provided information with respect to who got what in terms of contracts, and you know, basically it's a black hole. We don't know that. So there's about unverified or undocumented expenditures um, of at least 3 billion. So this is, they told you that they paid 100 million for some contract, but you don't have the document to be able to see that and kind of, confirm what was received in terms of did we buy goods, did we buy services? So 3 billion of that. There is about 1.5 billion worth of undocumented pending bills. We spoke about this last time. Um, the issue of pending bills is a very big issue in our country because counties are able to steal money by inflating pending bills. Again, if you come into Israel and you know the previous government was corrupt, and you come up with a bill of 200 million and say it wasn't paid when the previous corrupt government was there, it is very difficult to prove that you're lying, right? Because when people, if people know that the previous leaders were just as corrupt as the current one, and you say that there's
Mm,
200 million that wasn't paid, it kind of gives that claim a little bit of
I agree with you.
people think that it might be legit. So there's about 1.5 billion worth of pending bills. There is about 2.5 billion worth of irregular procurement, where again, either they say that we spent 100 million, but you can't see the documents, or the auditor can confirm that a certain price that was paid for something was inflated. Because oftentimes the auditor can look at this and say, you know what, we know this area, let's go and see
Right.
whether, they say that they spend 6,000 to buy something, but we know that if I go to the market, it's 3,000. So there's about 2.5 billion worth of
Mm,
procurement corruption. There's also about 3 billion worth of ghost projects or infrastructure that's basically been abandoned. So this
yes.
happens when people got a contract, they spend 5, 6 years running around trying to find someone to do it for less. Oftentimes they don't succeed, so they basically abandon it. So there's about 3 billion of that kind of spending. The other issue that we have seen in pretty much every county is the when leaders break the law when it comes to the percentage of revenue that they're using on salaries. So in this case, over that 8-year period, the county of Isiolo has violated that law by spending more than 35% of revenue to the tune of 1.5 billion. So within the 8 years, they've taken 1.5 billion in additional salary that should not have been spent. So if you're in Isiolo, just think about what 1.5 billion could have done for you in terms of building a hospital, in terms of making sure that there is a school, in terms of making sure that you have water that's reliable. That's what we're talking about. The last thing I will say is they have 2 billion worth of travel expenditures, allowances, and cash advances that cannot be accounted for in 8
Wa-
years. 2 billion of it cannot be accounted for. So when you tally all those things, you end up with 13.5 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I am I am shocked that 2 billion has been spent. Okay, not that any of the other is any much better, but just
Yeah.
travel. 2 billion.
It's
In
it's easy
fact,
to
what
see.
I am thinking next time
Yeah.
we need to, because sometimes, and that is one of the areas that bothers me very much.
Hmm. Hmm.
These leaders are always on podiums.
Yeah.
Every other time you
Right.
ask one question is, do you ever work? At what point do you really work? But the second question is, how much money are you
Hmm.
spending for you able to be on this podium? Because I know for a fact when you go out of town and you're on a podium that is out of your town or out of your county, there
Right.
has to be vehicles that have to be fueled. And these days,
Yeah.
most of them do not even like traveling by car. They want choppers.
Mm. Yeah.
So there has to be choppers that have to be fueled, or they own them. I am not quite sure. And
Yeah.
then your support staff will come through vehicles, and it's
Yeah.
never one car that is
Yeah.
transporting four people. It is one car that is transporting one person with
Yeah.
at least 12 motorcades behind that one person, stopping people who are actually working, because
Right.
now they stop the rest of you. Your cars cannot pass, cannot go through the roundabout, because
Hmm.
this other person who is going to a podium with
Yeah.
5 motorcades or motorcades now wants to pass. So the cost of the podium, the cost of their choppers, the
Right.
cost of their their motorcades and their
Right.
support staff who are going there with them.
Yeah.
Really, I see how it gets to 2 billion, but I think this is something because I saw some figure also coming from State House that was a
Yeah.
bit shocking. I think
Yeah.
next time, please, let's do numbers on what the county, the executive, and the parliament is spending on
Yeah.
podiums.
You're making a very good point here because, as someone who spends a lot of time looking at this data, I've gotten to a point where if I see something, sometimes I'll look on social media and I can see a certain governor has prepared some type of brochure, say, Merry Christmas or something like that. Uh, every little thing the government does, even that message costs you money. So if you go to your MP's, the social media account and you see messages from them telling you Merry Christmas, it costs you money for them to do that. You and I spoke in the last session about Nairobi County, and I told you that even after spending 55% of revenue on salaries, even after spending 1.2 billion on absolute wasteful travel, even after spending 6.3 billion on four lawyers, right? The county of Nairobi spent 324 million in what they called it citizen participation or something like that. Basically, when
Mm.
the governor is out there driving his cars and taking selfies, he is charging you, and he called that it was the second largest development project, 324 million. So when you see your governor running around taking selfies, trust me, that's also going to cost you.
We hear you.
Yeah.
Ah, it's, I, we had a session yesterday with you on diaspora remittance, and when that, one of
Yeah.
the people who had joined us said everything is wrong. Everything
Right.
is really wrong in the country.
Yeah.
Truthfully,
Mm-hmm.
everything is wrong. So we got to our first area on Isiolo,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
that is, of course, payroll blot and
Yeah.
wage inequality.
Right.
Um, Isiolo,
Mm-hmm.
we are not going even the Nairobi way of counting the number of people, but you can speak to that as well.
Right.
Isiolo has 36 advisors.
Mm-hmm.
The laws lets that they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be.
Right.
And then Isiolo again has 31 chief officers.
Mm-hmm.
The law is only for 18, not 19. That is
Right.
26 advisors and 13 extra chief officers, costing the county a total of 120 million a year,
Right.
more than the lawful levels. And you'll speak on the lawful levels. And then
Yeah.
overall, 46% of revenue, Isiolo revenue,
Mm-hmm.
again,
Yeah.
goes to salary, which is contrary to what the law stipulates. The law
Right.
stipulates that it's up to be 35%
Right.
cap. Um, and this exceeds that amount by 500 million. And
Mm-hmm.
then to speak on equality,
Yeah.
18 MPs alone as take 12% of the
Mm-hmm.
budget. In
Right.
MCAs,
Yeah.
12% of the but because it's estimated that the amount that goes to each MC, and you'll speak to this as well, is about
Right.
28.6 billion in a
Yeah.
year.
Mm-hmm.
Considering this is an area where people are earning
Yeah.
8,000 average, the ones who earn, leave the 56% poverty rate, the ones who
Right.
earn 8,500, and here is an
Mm-hmm.
MCA
Yeah.
who is earning in a year 28.6 total salary plus whatever
Yeah.
everything else that is allocated to them,
Mm-hmm.
28.6 million. Like
Yeah.
really, 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 really. These
Yeah.
leaders and the governor, it's about 12 million per year. If you
Right.
look at this,
Yeah.
this is 118 times more than the average citizen. And I
Yeah.
tell people,
Mm-hmm.
while you keep fighting against each other based on the tribe,
Right.
based on what,
Yeah.
between the MCA taking 12% of the total
Right.
revenue, we have
Mm-hmm.
not counted what the governor takes in terms of percentage. It
Yeah.
seems these people are taking a significant portion of the revenue
Yeah.
for themselves.
Yeah.
Whatever is left besides that, they will take it through corruption. At
Yeah.
what point you choose to fight me
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to this person who is taking each and every of your task for
Right.
themselves? Really, is this devolution? Is this
Yeah.
self-enrichment of just a select few at the expense of the majority?
Yeah. I mean, so the question that you're asking is these are the very questions that we need to be asking because I always tell people the entire point of devolution, the entire point of devolution was to be able to allow citizens, regardless of where they are, to be able to access services, to be able to access development, and to be able to hold their leaders accountable. So when we are sending 5 billion to the county of Isiolo, the expectation is that the vast majority of this money is going to actually serve a citizen to be able to build a hospital that wasn't there before, to be able to buy equipment, to be able to make sure that when I walk into a county hospital in Isiolo, that there's a doctor there who's trained, that there's a nurse, that there's equipment to be able to diagnose. That's the entire point of government. And so when you hear me saying that, I'm looking at the amount of money that we're spending on salary. It's because I know when you spend 46% of the revenue, when the law says the maximum is 35, that automatically means that that 11% difference is going to deny someone else somewhere basic services, right? The entire point of government is to serve citizens. Um,
Mm,
when when we put together a law, the Public Finance Management Law of 2015, that spells out to county governments the expectations with respect to how much of the revenue can be spent on salaries, we are trying to make sure
mm,
that we put guardrails into place to make sure that the vast majority of the funds that are going to these county governments are actually going to serve the intended purpose, to make sure that when a mother walks into a county government hospital with a sick son, that there is a hospital that's there, that's built, that there is equipment, that there is a doctor, there is a nurse. That's the entire point of government. And so when you
yes.
look and see that the county government of Isiolo has decided to spend 46% of its revenue on salaries as opposed to the legal limit of 35%. What's actually happening here is not just, this is not an administrative oversight where, they spend 1% or 2% more. It's a decision that is rooted in what I call entitlement, where nobody is asking what the point of government is. If you are the governor of a county and
Yeah.
you see that your county is spending 46% of the money on salaries, when you know that the maximum is 35, um, that should bother you, right? That should bother you because again, if you
Yes.
spend $1 more on salaries, that means that you won't have the same amount to spend on healthcare, to buy equipment. When I submitted when I published my analysis of Isiolo, in one of my posts, there was a clip of people going to a county government hospital to
Mhm.
to get help, right? We talked about patients. They walk into a government hospital and they are being chased away because the hospital is saying that they don't have equipment, that they don't have people to serve them. So there's actually like a fight because these people don't want to go back home, and the county government is saying we don't have the ability to help you. So how is that possible
Mm,
when the county is spending 46% of its revenue on compensation? Again, none of these counties employ more than 1%. So,
mm,
I spend a lot of time talking about the amount of money that we're spending on salaries because it is central to any discussion around the effectiveness of government. Um,
of
you know,
government.
yeah, so that's the importance of it, is that when we spend 46%, that automatically means that whatever we're supposed to spend on healthcare or education, that money has to come from
Yes.
somewhere. And that's why we have to
Yes.
talk about this issue. So it should not be happening.
Yes.
It's against the law, but again, in our country, it doesn't seem to bother anybody that they're breaking the law.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Again, the purpose of the county government, and we've pointed out in Nairobi, is not to employ people, but to provide services to the people. So
right.
if they structure employment
Yeah,
as the majority part of their function, I
right.
think that is a failure. And
Yeah,
also, it's just not employment. It's one thing if people are employed and everything is working, but if
yeah,
it's at the expense of the other services which the county was ultimately formed to provide,
yeah,
then that is not acceptable at all.
right.
So we go to the next. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
No,
Sorry.
I was going to say that I encourage Kenyans to think of, so when you're talking about how much we're spending, don't focus on the number. Focus on how much in terms of money we are spending on this, because that's what determines whether or not we can do all these other things. If I'm the governor that decided to spend 65% of revenue on compensation, as my county of Kiambu did in 2023, 2024, that means that I don't have 35% of the revenue remaining to do all these other things, to develop the county, to build infrastructure. And so if you spend 65% of revenue on compensation, automatically that means that you're going to break even other laws, right? Because, for example, Nairobi, that we're talking about Nairobi here. Um, Last year, Nairobi was not able to actually meet the minimum spend for development, which is 30%. So our county governments are supposed to spend 30% of their revenue on development. Well, Nairobi was not able to
Definitely.
meet that because when you spend 55% of the revenue on salaries, you've automatically taken the money that you would have been able to spend to build a hospital. And so I want you to imagine, take that 1 year, right? So they've essentially spent 6.7 billion additional on salaries. You spend another 6.3 billion on these 4 lawyers, and now you are not able
Mm.
to actually spend the 30% that you're supposed to spend on development. Nairobi, with a budget of 33 billion, should have spent at least something like 10 billion to be able to get that 30%, but they did not do that, right?
Yeah.
And so when they don't do that, now take that 1 year and extrapolate it into a 10-year period. And that's how you go to a county and you say, okay, so we've spent 100 billion here, and you're supposed to be taking 30% and developing it. So I'm looking for 30 billion worth of development, and I don't see it. But that's how that happens. So when they
Yeah.
when they invest 15%, 16% on development, and oftentimes, what they're calling development is not really development. I gave you the example of Nairobi spending 324 million on citizen participation, as they called it, and they call that a development.
Yeah.
So if you are driving around Nairobi and you're looking for this development, you don't see it because the governor took his vehicle,
You
started
don't
driving
see.
around, taking selfies, and
Mm.
he called that development.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. The next point is going to be the airport mirage. I
Hmm.
think we've seen this
Yeah,
for some reason. This government, including the county government, is so excited about airports. I saw one being
yeah,
opened in Ukambani the other day, and it was
yeah,
just one lane,
yeah,
and I think not even a kilometer. And
yeah,
then there was one which was I think being retarmacked or something in Homa Bay.
yeah.
So in Isiolo County, they spent, okay, they budgeted
Hmm.
for 2.7 billion for
Right.
an international airport.
Yeah,
International.
right.
Um, and even with that amount, they did not get to finish. Now they're asking for 4.8 billion to complete that airport.
Yeah,
What I want to bring to question, because that would bring it to about 8 billion to
right.
fully do that.
Yeah,
What I want to bring to question is more than half of the residents
right,
are living below the poverty line. The
right.
average earning per that county
Yeah,
is what 8,500.
right.
And here the government is proceeding to
Yeah,
build an airport.
yeah,
People in Isiolo
yeah.
walk to hospital because they can't afford money to pay
Right.
border, to pay
Yeah.
border. But
Mm-hmm.
here we are building an
Right.
international airport
Mm-hmm.
at 8 billion, which is even
Right.
above the budget of
Yeah.
the whole county.
Right.
Who exactly, the people who is living below the poverty line
Yeah.
and the people who are earning 8,500, who of those people
Yeah.
is going to flee using that airport?
So I think you're beginning to understand why we have such a problem in this country, because
Mm.
I spoke about what I call the lack of common sense and business sense. Um, if you come from the private sector, you know that you are judged as a leader based on value creation, based on solving problems. And some are like, I've been working as an economist over the last 15 years, right? I am judged by not only how much money I bring in, uh, but on profitability. Okay, so I need to be able to accomplish serving clients, and I need to do that in a profitable way. So
Mm.
I'm used to that. So every time I'm thinking about spending anything, I need to be able to justify. If I decide to
Mm-hmm.
get on a flight and go see a client in Philadelphia, I need to be able to say
Mm.
why I could not
Yes.
use either Zoom or some other tools to be able to communicate with the client. So,
Yes.
it's the reason why you look at government today and you ask yourself, what is the motivation for some of these things that we are doing? The county of Isiolo
Mm.
has the average citizen there is making 8,500. Um, I can take the
Yes.
data points that we talked about in terms of, for example, the poverty rate. The average citizen there, again, making 8,500 a month. We don't have roads, good roads. We don't have reliable sources of water. I can take this information and take it to a high school kid in any high school in Isiolo, and I'm willing to bet that that high school kid is going to make better decisions in terms of how to deploy these resources to serve citizens. So if that's the case, how is it possible that people that are responsible for deploying these billions decide that they are going to spend 3.1 billion to build an airport that has never served anybody?
Mm.
I told you that some of my closest friends live in Isiolo, and every time I come to Kenya, I spend a lot of time in Isiolo. Um, One of my favorite restaurants is right there by the airport, so I go there all the time and I
Yes.
spend hours there. I have never seen one airplane leave Isiolo. I've never seen one plane land in Isiolo. I see cows. Every time I go there, I see cows going into the airport. And so we are talking about a country with a 56% poverty rate, where the average citizen is making 8,500 a month. And the people that are deciding to deploy 3.1 billion of the money that we've sent in, um, and again, this is not part of the 13.5 billion that we talked about. This is okay. They say that they spent 3.1 billion additional, right? Remember, I told you that in 10 years we've sent 41 billion there. 13.5 billion
Yes.
cannot be accounted for or stolen. This 3.1
Mm-hmm.
billion is separate. So they go and spend 3.1 billion, and then nobody can use that airport, right?
Yeah.
Again, every
Yeah.
time I go there, I see cows going in there.
Mm.
And so, I was able to follow up on this when I made that discovery, and I find out
Mm.
that the county government is actually asking for an additional 4.8 billion to be able to
Wow.
bring the airport to the standard that they want to. So you've already invested 3.1 billion. The airport is now serving one person today, and the county government is asking for another 4.8 billion to be able to bring it to the standard that they want. And so my point is, even if you were to do that, right? Even if you do that, you have not done anything that changes the math in terms of
Yes.
the people's ability to use this facility. So you invest 8
Mm.
billion, and remember, every single shilling that we are sending to Isiolo is borrowed. Remember, I told you that at the national
Yes.
level, we are running budget deficits. This year, we are going to spend 4.3 billion as a country, and we are only going to be able to raise 2.5, 2.6, maybe if we are so lucky, 2.7. So over the last
Mm.
5 years, we've been borrowing at least 40 to 50% of our budget. So we borrow all
Yes.
these trillions. We send that 5 billion to Isiolo because, like I said, Isiolo 10 years into devolution can only raise 3% of its budget, right? 3%. And this is it's a big reason as to why we in this kind of a mess, because imagine if you're Isiolo, you spent 5 billion last year and you wake up and you say you want to
Mm.
spend 6 billion this year. There is nothing that you and I can do to control that, to stop Isiolo from doing that. There's nothing.
Mm.
If Isiolo wakes up tomorrow and says we want to
Yes.
spend 6 billion, even though they can only raise 3%, that's what they're gonna do. We have no ability. And so imagine this situation now. This is just one county where they only raise 3%, and they've been doing the same thing over the last 10 years, and we have no way to control
Yes.
what they do. There's nothing that tells them they need to raise a certain amount locally. And now start to understand why all of a sudden we've gone from 2.3 trillion in 2014 to 12 trillion today.
Yes.
This is why.
12 trillion. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. And
Hmm.
and that you speak to that on the aspect, I long to the time where, and you've touched on it before in the previous point, we'll get to
Right.
the point where
Hmm.
before a project is undertaken,
Right.
public benefit must be proven.
Yeah.
Because when you look at this, I think
Yeah.
it was only private, and
Hmm.
by private I mean the leadership that was
Yeah.
being considered in this position in two
Yeah.
areas. one of the areas is that they can
Yeah.
get whatever money they're going to get through the procurement. We know that
Right.
happens. We cannot
Right.
start pretending, oh, you're saying things that don't exist. And then
Yeah.
the second is they wanted an airport for themselves to fly their helicopters and their
Yeah.
planes. When
Exactly.
public, it is them against us. At all
Yeah.
times, it is
Yeah.
them against us.
I mean, I say to you, I can take an average student, C student, Form 3, Form 4, and I'll give him the data point that we just talked about. I say the average citizen in Isiolo is making 8,500 a month before taxes. 56% of the population have a very hard time affording 2 meals a day.
Mm,
Water is an issue in this county. Roads are an issue in this county.
yes,
County hospitals are almost non-functioning. That high school kid from Form 3 or Form 4 is going to be able to make
yes,
better decisions than these people. And so it is difficult to even uh, comprehend what must be going through someone's head when they decide that they are going to invest 3.1 billion on an airport that nobody uses. I mean, this just defies credibility. I can't even begin to describe what kind of
yes,
how unfortunate this is, because again, you have a country where people are going to hospitals and they're asked to spend the night with a stranger, or they're sent back home because apparently we don't have equipment, we don't have people, and we've sunk in almost 8 billion, or we want to sink in almost 8 billion um, in an infrastructure project that's not going to serve anybody. And remember, these 8 billions, when we're done spending it, we have not paid it, right? Our country owes
yes,
12 trillion today. We are spending 75% of every single shilling in this country that we earn on debt
yes,
service for stupid projects like this. And this is just one county.
yes.
Yeah,
It's quite unfortunate. And even when you're looking at it, it's not even something that is of public service, but
yeah.
it also something that does not generate revenue. So you're not
Actually, you're
making
making,
profits.
yeah.
Are you benefiting the public?
So listen to this. Even
Yeah.
after they spent this 3.1 billion that they've already spent, that
Mm-hmm.
airport costs between 50 and 70 million a month to maintain. It costs 50 to 70 million a month to maintain.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, I think it's 50 to 70 million a year to maintain. Sorry, a year to maintain. And again,
Not
it's not
anymore.
serving anybody. Yeah, it's not serving anybody. Like I said, I go there, you don't see a plane going in and out. We've already sunk in that amount. They're asking you to spend another 4.8 billion. And it was interesting listening to a county official, because he was asked by, I think, some journalists, why do you think people are not using the airport? And his answer was, um,
Mm.
he said that, oh, people think that the airport is still under construction, so they are not aware that they can actually start using it. So it wasn't that, according to him, it wasn't that the citizen that's making 8,500 a month is not going to have the financial flexibility to use this airport. It's just that we have not done enough marketing to let people know that they can use the airport. Yeah.
Kenyans ni sisi kwa sisi. It is
Mm-hmm.
us against the
Yeah.
politicians. It's never Bonnie who is a Kikuyu or
Yeah.
me who is a Luya. It
Right.
is never it is us versus
Yeah.
them. The next point
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take to talk about the market that never opened.
Yeah.
So 2018, Isiolo awarded a 545 million
Yeah.
modern market. That is about 10% of their annual revenue.
Mm-hmm.
6 years later,
Yeah.
they're still unfinished.
Yeah.
And in regards to reporting, and you'll touch on it, no
Yeah.
reporting was done to the PRA.
Right.
There was no tender disclosure in regarding the award,
Yeah.
and then just a $500 million ghost market that
Yeah.
is not being used yet. So,
Yeah.
as you speak on it, I just want to ask also,
Mm-hmm.
um, why is there no one being held accountable on
Right.
this matter? And then why is it being treated as just a reporting failure and
Yeah.
not a crime? by the EACC and the
Right.
PPRA?
So, you know, I have spent a lot of time talking to Kenyans about this issue. When you open any auditor's report, the most common word that I see in any of these reports is irregular and unsupported. And this is whether I'm dealing with the CDF, whether I'm dealing with the county government, whether I'm dealing with the national government. It is corruption. When you hear the word irregular,
Mm.
it's accountants speak for corruption. Um, and you know, when you look at a project like this, you ask yourself, how does a county government, where the average citizen is making 8,500 a month, where 56% of the population have a very hard time affording 2 meals a day, where there is unreliable sources of water, when their county hospitals are not able to serve people. How does a county government decide that they are going to sink in close to 600 million on a market? How does that possible? And I don't have a lot of answers for you. I mean, the only thing I can tell you is that, in my view, there's often two things that happen. Either the people that are making these decisions are just some of the dumbest people, and I hate to say that. They just don't understand that if you spend 600 million on a market, as opposed to building a hospital and making sure that that hospital actually
Yes,
has equipment, right? So do you have a situation
yes,
where people are just not smart decision makers? They don't know how best to deploy this money to make sure that they serve the most people most efficiently, or that there is another motivation behind it. So, and what I'm talking about is where I go in and I propose to build a market. I know it doesn't really serve anybody, but when I give that contract to people that happen to be my friends, and we say that the cost of the airport is 600 million, I can get 100 million for myself, right?
yes,
That is, that's what I say, because when you go and look at some of these things as a person from the private sector, it does not make sense how anybody decides to deploy 600 million like that in that way when you
mm.
know that they can, or rather even someone builds a road, right? Build a
Yeah,
hospital
you're right.
where someone can walk in and get served. Um, how is it that you're spending 600 million on something like that? And the other thing I told you is that when you see contracts that are running 7, 8 years, what happens oftentimes is that these contracts are issued to companies that are new. They have never done anything like this. They've never built anything, and so they have a very hard time being able to complete them because you need expertise, right? You need experience to be able to do this.
Yes.
So when you go through these auditors reports, you often see contracts that have been extended for 6, 7 years because people don't have the expertise that they say that they do. They've never done this before.
Mm.
And sometimes it's a situation where they take that 600 million, they go around and spend 2 years looking for a company that can do it for 300. So that is why you see um, a lot of projects that have not been completed. If you go and look at the national government, and that's actually one of the projects that I'm working on, is to be able to quantify the amount of unfinished projects that exist where we've spent billions and we have not gotten anything. It is unbelievable. And so when you think about that, and you think about this particular market where it costs almost 600 million, nobody has been
Mm.
able to use that airport because it has not been completed for 6, 7 years. And
Yes,
this 600 million, right? We already owe it. Every year we are paying significant
yes.
interest. Think about last year, our debt service cost was 1.6 trillion, and our debt was
Mm.
around 10 point something. So we are paying a very high interest rates on this debt. So take the 600 million that you're talking about and just apply 15% interest on that. And so we are carrying that in our books this year, and it's not serving anybody. And we do that for 6, 7 years, and you begin to understand why our economic problems are as serious as they are.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think in Kenya, I think the leaders are acting like a father
yeah,
who is a delinquent. They go take loans,
right.
and the purpose of those loans is just to finance their drinking habits. And
Yeah,
then eventually, as a family, you're
yeah,
supposed to deal with that payment. And when you look around and and that father is not even working to make money. They're
Yeah.
not working to make money. When you look
Mm-hmm.
around and decide, oh, what are we going to pay this loan with?
Yeah.
Mlevi amekunywa ameshiba, amefurahia maisha yake, nyinyi wengine ndo
Yeah.
mnabaki kwa shida. Like, it's not
Yeah.
sustainable at all.
Yeah.
All right. Next area
Mm-hmm.
is unlawful tendering and inflate
Yeah.
contracts.
Right.
And that is about 2.5 billion.
Yeah.
So hey, this county government has repeatedly broken
Yeah.
procurement law. And I'm
Right.
going to give a few examples and then you will touch on the others. For
Right.
example, they spent uh, 320 million was
Mm-hmm.
spent on 12 suppliers. These were
Yeah.
pre-qualified suppliers.
Right.
According to the law, and that pre-qualification list had 129 suppliers.
Right.
According to the law,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot give preference to only a specific number of suppliers.
Yeah.
There has to be a way for it to be rotational. And
Right.
the only thing that can disqualify is
Yeah.
either not merit in terms of price, because by the fact that you're pre-qualified, it means
Right.
you're already qualified. So the
Right.
only thing that can disqualify one is merit, not based on lack of merit based on pricing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what are the chances? 320 million, sorry, will be spent only on 12 suppliers over a period of a couple of years. That is one
Right.
issue, and you'll touch on it. The
Mm-hmm.
second issue, uh, there is they procured vehicles.
Yeah.
It costed 20 million. There was
Mm-hmm.
no tender
Yeah.
for such procurement.
Mm-hmm.
There was no approval there
Yeah.
was no documented approval for such procurement.
Right.
How is this county functioning like this? And and we speak about failing institutions.
Right.
At some point you point and you think, oh, maybe it's the Senate, or maybe it's just Parliament only and
Yeah.
the judiciary. But look at this is another separate institution that is supposed to flag this and stop this. That is the
Yeah.
PPRA. Really
Yeah.
speak on this and tell us why is there consistency in failure of institutions in Kenya?
So I've always said that Kenya is not unique in terms of our ability or our proclivity to have corrupt leaders. I mean, corrupt leaders can emerge anywhere in the world. I think what's unique about our situation in Kenya is that is how what happens when people misbehave, right? If you think about a place like the U.S. where um, the competition between the Republicans and Democrats is such that it is so intense all the time, and sometimes that frustrates people. But this back and forth, right, where these parties are
Mm,
able to keep each other in check, is
yes,
usually helpful for the average citizen because, for example, if Trump becomes president and he's not able to just be a
yes.
corrupt thief and steal everything, right? So when there's a back and forth between political parties, and the
Mm,
opposition knows its job in terms of keeping the government accountable, that usually
mm,
ends up benefiting the average citizen. The issue that we have in
yes.
our country
Mm,
is the total opposite of that. I mean, think about we haven't spoken about this, but the county of Isiolo has 18 MCAs. The point of the MCAs in Isiolo is what? First of all, the county can only raise about 190 million worth of its revenue. So 3% of its 5.2 billion is what they can raise locally. So these 18
mm,
people, they are not spending their day trying to generate revenue on behalf of the county because they have not, for
yes.
10 years straight, they have never been able to generate more than 3 or 4% of its revenue. So then you are saying, okay, so they're not helping the county generate revenue. They are not really spending their time developing the county. What are they spending their time on? So at the very least, we should be able to expect accountability so that if the governor decides to spend
Yes.
46% of the budget on salaries, someone should say, whoa, that's not, you can't do that because that means we're not going to be able to build hospitals. You don't hear anything like that. When
Yes.
you hear, just listen to
No.
some of this, right? In 2022, 2023, the county government claimed to have transferred 597 million to other government agencies. It's kind of like they say that there is a Department of Water, and they've transferred a certain amount, the auditor says, show me the receipt. They don't exist. So almost 600 million worth of transfers like that cannot be accounted for. They claim to have spent
Mm.
760 million purchasing various assets, but when you say to them, okay, show me either the asset or show me a receipt, they can only justify 326. So they say that they
Yes.
spent
Mm.
762, but can only show you 326, right? This is just examples. They say they had
Yes.
415 billion worth of pending bills that came up. They have no contract to show for
Mm-hmm.
it. They have no asset where they
Yes.
can say this computer is what we spend the money on. Um, and
Yes.
again, we are talking about a country that has MCAs. Their job is supposed to be holding the government accountable, but they are not doing it.
Yes.
35 million worth of bursaries in that year, 2022, 2023, that cannot be accounted for. And again, for the 8 years that I reviewed, there's not one year where the county government of Isiolo was able to tell the government, this is who we give this contract for, and this is the amount, and this is the process that we use. 8 years straight, without any accountability. I've spoken about, what I call, it's in accounting, right? In public accounting, when the auditor goes through your records and they're looking to see whether or not at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, when an accountant is looking at your transaction, they want to be able to express an opinion and say, does the financial statement that you're looking at, do these financial statements represent what we believe took place during the year? When it comes to the balance sheet, does whatever we are putting down as the total assets, for example, does that truly represent the status of this entity at the end, on this day that we issue the financial statements?
Yes.
Um, and generally speaking, there are four levels of statements that you can get. What's called an unqualified
Yes.
opinion is the very best you can get. And it means that
Mm.
everything is on the up and up. We don't see any big issues. Everything's good. The second level is what we call qualified opinion, which is they are saying for the most part everything is good, but we do have some concerns here, and they enumerate what the issues are. The third one is what's
Mm.
called an adverse opinion. An adverse opinion
Well.
is basically the accountant telling you there's nothing here that can be trusted. This should not be trusted.
Mm.
Um, and it's basically supposed to be the kiss of death. It's supposed to indicate that um, the underlying data and anything else that we see in these financial statements cannot be accounted for, cannot be relied upon, right? The last is what we call a disclaimer where they're saying we don't even have enough information to express an opinion. The county of Isiolo received 3 years of adverse opinions back to back to back from 2016 to 2019. Every single year, it was the same thing. The auditor saying there's nothing that we trust in these numbers. It gives you an
Yes.
indicator of what's happening there. And again, for 8 years, they have not published, as required by law, a list of who got contracts and how they got them. And they've spent, something like 600 million on this one project. It has not been completed.
Mm.
Nobody has ever used it for 6, 7 years. And again, this is just one item out of so many.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I just want to add some areas that will
Hmm.
just show the public really what this county is doing.
Yeah.
So, for example, there is 6 million that was spent on temporary employment.
Yeah.
There are no names on who was employed. There
Yeah.
are no IDs, no records of who
Right.
came and worked and was paid 6
Yeah.
million.
Hmm.
Additionally, there was 43 million
Right.
cash advance that
Yes.
was never returned by anyone. And at
Yes.
that point, you wonder, ESCC,
Right.
because I'm believing in this case, it was never returned with a record
Yeah.
of who it was given to. So it
Yeah.
means the CC can comfortably go after them and say, you have 43 million or 2 million of the 43 million. Bring
Right.
it back or we put you in.
Yeah.
Nothing has happened to that. And then finally, this one just excited me.
Right.
28 million was
Right.
spent by laptops and
Hmm.
ICT equipment.
Yeah. Hmm.
There was no invoices,
Yeah.
there were no delivery notes, there was no proof of payment, and
Yeah.
worst of all,
Yeah.
there was no laptop. There
And
was no
that
laptop. So on
yeah, I
record,
mean,
they've spent
yeah.
28
I mean, because I've spent a lot of time looking at these counties, some counties are more, some thieves are more sophisticated in terms of how they do it. So, for example, if I go out and issue a contract for 400 million, and oftentimes what happens is that the contract is issued, maybe a couple of companies respond, and the contract is issued for 100 million. Some of the counties will go back within like
Mm,
a few months and they go and revise that contract to, they change the scope, right? And all of a sudden they increase the budget by 20 million or 30 million. It's not supposed to happen, but it does happen. But there's a little bit of sophistication in the way that they're doing it, right? Um, or some of
mm,
them will put together a sham procurement where they have, they issue the tender, and they
mhm.
receive responses, and then when the auditor says, okay, show me the advertisement for the tender, they don't have it. So there's a spectrum of sophistication in terms of how your money is stolen. The county of
Yes.
Isiolo seems to be the least sophisticated. They don't even bother. They just, again, there's an example here of a tender that they issued to someone. I think it was for 90 something million. The Under the law, if you get two companies or three companies to respond and they've all met the requirements that you set up, if someone is cheaper, even by $1, you're supposed to go with that company by law, right? If they've met all the requirements and one is cheaper than the other one, by law you're supposed to select the one that's cheap. If you decide that you're not going to do that, you need to be able to articulate why you're choosing another company. In this case, if CLO decides to award a contract to someone, and that contract was more by at least 30 million, right? So one person says 90
Wow.
something, the other one says 60 something, and they decide no, they're just going to give it to this person. So they're not even hiding sort of their motivations. Again, you have hundreds of millions issued in contracts where nobody, like if I ask you, if I say to you out of the 5.2 billion that we're talking about as revenue, if I say they spent 3 billion on in operating costs. You don't know who, you don't know who provided what. Like they don't tell you that,
Yes.
And again, it's illegal, but in our country, just because something is legal does not seem to bother anybody. I mean, we started by saying that under the law, you're not supposed to spend more than 35% of revenue on salaries. Everybody knows that's illegal, but 90% of the counties in our country violate that. I talked about the fact
Yeah.
that our county governments are required to spend 30% of their revenue on development. Many
Yeah.
of our county
Mm,
governments don't do that. I gave you the example of Nairobi, where out of 33 billion, they used 324 million, and it was the second biggest quote unquote development project.
mm,
And these people are not conducting themselves as though they
mm.
respect the law, right? And that's the biggest issue that we have is that these laws don't mean anything to anybody. And I tell
Yes.
people this downside of this is that there are kids, right, that whose fortunes in life, whose hopes in life rise and fall based on the conduct of these people with the resource. If you go in there
Yeah.
and you decide to issue 1 billion in contract and citizens don't get anything for that, there's someone who's gonna lose out on
Mm.
opportunities. That airport that was built for,
Very.
where they've already sunk in 3.1 billion. Can you imagine the number of kids that are not going to be served just because of that one mistake? It's gonna take years to overcome.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm. I agree. It's it's
yeah,
it's really uh, inabo. Like uh, inabo.